they adopted an offshore practice and has grown to now, I believe, 8 states, although that's changing all the time. We'll probably have all 50 states with that here in a few years. I like these for residential type entities because it saves us a lot of money on tax returns and that sort of thing. I have a report on that I can send you if you want one. Just shoot me an email and I'll be glad to send it to you. The Limited Liability Limited Partnership, or triple LP, here in Nevada we have the most advanced asset protection law in the United States in this regard. And the triple LP will protect you as the general partner. Now, the general partner of that limited partnership is going to control the whole shooting match. Even if you only have a minority of ownership, you'll still have 100% control. Kind of cool. It's here in Nevada we have no public record of the ownership of who the limited partners are. And there's some very good estate tax planning benefits. Just ask Sam Walton, who used this very technique to shield a lot of assets from potential estate tax. What I like about the limited partnership is, used properly, it can be the very pivot point of all your asset protection planning. Now, this is how the typical limited partnership works. You see on the left there, you'll see the general partner. That would be you. And even though you might have 1% of the ownership, you would have 100% of the control. You'd have all of the discretionary decision-making power, and you get to take management fees from your positive cash flow. Meanwhile, on the right side is the limited partners. Now, traditionally, people would place themselves or their crazy brother-in-law or maybe their kids in the limited partner role. A lot of times you'll see people put their kids in as limited partners, and that's where we get that title, Family Limited Partnership. In reality, there is no such law as the Family Limited Partnership. It is a traditional limited partnership where the parents have taken the role as the managing general partners, and they've identified their adult children as the limited partners. The reason I don't recommend doing that is that your children might die or get divorced or they might get sued. It's much better to use probably a trust as the limited partner, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. The limited partnership, in my view, should not do business with the general public because that exposes it to liability. We want your limited partnership instead to be the owner of your stock accounts, your mutual funds, your options, and your corporations and LLCs through which you do business with the general public. So a better way for privacy and liability protection would be to use, as you see on the right side here, a trust as the limited partner. This is a much smarter way to go. Now, what type of trust is going to be the subject of our next few minutes here? There's basically 3 choices of how the limited partner side should be allocated out. A lot of people start out by using the living trust as their limited partner, and then I like to see the wealth preservation trust, which is much stronger for lawsuit protection, or maybe even a family dynasty trust that can go on for several generations. My favorite combination, and what I see most often now, is that people will use the living trust as the minority limited partner, but then use the wealth preservation trust as the majority limited partner, because that is beyond the reach of creditors. So that's a very good way to go. The living trust is something we should all have. If we're alive and over the age of 18, we should have a living trust in place with all of the things that go with it. The power of attorney for health care, the physician's directive on artificial life support, and so forth. This is how the typical living trust works for a married couple. Single people, it looks just the same. It just doesn't divide into 2 at the death of at your death. It just goes right down to your heirs. Married people, it divides into 2 at the death of the first spouse, and there's no probate that takes place at that time until the death of the second spouse, and again, there's no probate. I'm sorry, dear, they just gave me the 10-minute sign. I got to get through this presentation. Can you save that and we'll talk after the break? Okay. Now, the Wealth Preservation Trust is something I really like to use. This is an irrevocable trust for the benefit of your loved ones, probably your kids, or if you don't have kids, maybe your nephews and nieces. This is beyond the reach of your creditors. You select who the beneficiaries are going to be. You're not going to be a beneficiary. What's going to happen is you're going to use this trust as the majority limited partner of your limited partnership, and then you will control the partnership as the managing general partner. See what I mean? You'll have a differentiation between ownership versus control. And then the trust itself, anything that it owns is outside your estate and beyond the reach of predators who might be out there trying to get your assets. It can also not only protect you, but also protect your loved ones. If my children over on this side of the room, if you were to go through a divorce and you were to go through a lawsuit, the trustee could withhold distributions to you until your divorce is over and your lawsuit is completed, and then they could start back up. It's a great way to take discretion away from the judge and hold it in the hand of the trustee, because the discretionary distributions almost prohibit a judge from being, he can order distributions all he wants to, but the trustee won't have the legal power to make a distribution to you while you're in a lawsuit or a divorce. So, too bad. So this is the way it would look in terms of a visual graphic with your Wealth Preservation Trust on the right. Notice that it only owns two things. It owns 99% of the limited partnership, and it owns life insurance on you, the grantor, paying off outside of your taxable estate at death. Kind of cool. If you'd like to have this slide, shoot me an email and I'll be glad to send it to you in one of my articles called Creating the Ultimate Inheritance. This is the way the same model looks, except using the living trust alongside of the Wealth Preservation Trust. That's probably my favorite combination if you're not going to use the Dynasty Trust. Now, the Dynasty Trust is the same type of thing, but it goes on for many generations into the future, long after you and I have left the planet and checked out. The Dynasty Trust will benefit one generation after another, and actually can be put on automatic pilot if you do it the right way. So here's our same model, except now we're going to have life insurance not only on the founder, but also on the second generation, and the third generation, and the fourth generation, payable to the Dynasty Trust. That way we can wipe out mortgages, we can expand our businesses, we can make further investments, and the money comes in tax-free because it's an irrevocable trust outside of my estate as the founder, and outside of your estate as well as my children and as my grandchildren. Kind of cool. We have life insurance on the founders' lives, but payable to the Dynasty Trust. And then we could use that for a family endowment fund, sort of our personal version of the Nobel Prize, where we can incentivize and reward members of our family for being productive citizens. It's a self-renewing source of family wealth if we use it with life insurance on each succeeding generation. I have an article on this called Creating the Ultimate Inheritance, and that's also the subject of one of the conversations that Dave and I have on Today's Business on that album. I think you'd find it very interesting. Well, I only get a chance to talk with you for a few minutes today. I could probably go on for a whole day on this stuff. It's really interesting to me. But I have the chance to talk basically about the tip of the iceberg while we're together at this situation. So I'd like to make an offer to those of you who are here today. It's different from the one that I offered yesterday. So if you heard yesterday's offer, this is a different deal. And here's what it is. We